"Old lady, you are never stepping foot in this house again. Go take care of your own life, because here you just get in the way." That was what Vanessa said out loud, standing right in front of the open garage, while two neighbors walked slowly by on the sidewalk. They heard absolutely everything. Mrs. Higgins, who was sweeping the front of the house next door, froze with her broom in midair. The young man at the front gate stood motionless, holding a grocery bag, looking at us without knowing how to react. The hot wind kicked up a little dust that got into my eyes, irritating them instantly. Vanessa remained leaning against the doorframe, with a smirk on her face, like someone finally ridding themselves of an unbearable burden she had been dragging for too long. I stood motionless, clutching my old notebook against my chest. My body locked up completely. But I didn't cry. Not right there. I didn't cry that day either. You know that moment when you understand, in a split second, that the person you took in and cared for sees zero value in you? It was right then. The down payment for that house had been paid with my money. And Michael's college tuition had come out of my pocket too. But now, after she received that multi-million-dollar inheritance and decided to change her lifestyle, I had become an obstacle, an item out of place. Go, Martha, disappear. I don't want you near my children. They don't need to be around failure. Her words sliced through the air like razor blades. Michael was behind her, silent. He didn't defend me. He didn't move a single muscle. A limousine pulled up at the corner, waiting for Vanessa to take her to their new luxury apartment in the city. Michael looked at her. Then he looked at me. His face lost its color when he realized what I had done earlier that morning. I didn't say anything in that moment. I just took a step back, slowly moving away, because 3 days later he would discover that I had made a decision he never imagined. And right there, everything changed forever. I was born and raised in a simple house in a small town in the Midwest. My mother was a seamstress, and it was from her that I learned to hold a needle and thread long before I understood what the word responsibility meant. My father died young, and the house stayed too quiet for a while, a silence that weighed heavy. I married young, thinking I would build a big, noisy family, but life has its own plans and rarely consults us. When Michael was just 10 years old, my husband suffered a massive heart attack and left me alone in the world to raise our son. I didn't have time for prolonged grief. The bills didn't wait for me to dry my tears. Food didn't appear on the table by itself. The school didn't forgive lateness. So I became 3 things at once: mother, father, and tireless worker. In the morning, I cleaned other people's houses. In the afternoon, I did small sewing alterations for the neighbors. At night, I prepared meals to sell the next day. There was no luxury, there was no rest, there was no choice. But there was Michael, and that was enough fuel to get me on my feet every day before dawn. He grew up seeing my effort. He knew every detail of the calluses on my hands. He knew when I came home limping from fatigue. He knew when I pretended everything was fine, even when the world was crashing down on my shoulders. I made it a point to ensure he didn't carry the weight that belonged to me. When he wanted to go on a field trip, I found a way to pay for it. When he needed new clothes for a school presentation, I unstitched old fabrics and sewed something that looked handsome and presentable. The years passed like that, one day at a time, like someone crossing an endless bridge without daring to look down. When Michael finished high school and said he wanted to go to college, I felt fear and pride at the same time, mixed in my chest. Fear of the immense cost, pride in the size of his dream. It was at that time that I made one of the most difficult decisions of my entire life. I sold the house my mother had left me. It was simple, small, old, but it was hers. It was my physical connection to everything I had lived and to my roots. However, college tuition cost a fortune, and I knew he wouldn't get another chance like this. I sold it for a low value because the house needed urgent repairs, but every single cent went directly toward his degree. I remember the day of the closing. I signed the paper with a trembling hand, holding back tears. It felt like I was burying a fundamental part of my own history. But at the same time, it felt like I was pouring the foundation for his life. Michael graduated, got a good job, and I thought that finally, the tide was turning for our little family. He started going out, meeting new people, and one day, he showed up with Vanessa. She was beautiful, modern, full of strong opinions, always impeccably dressed. At first I tried to like her. Every mother-in-law tries. She spoke loudly, had ready-made answers for everything, and sometimes she looked at me as if she were assessing me from head to toe. I noticed it, but I pretended not to. Michael seemed happy, and for me, that was the only thing that mattered. The first time I felt something strange was a tiny detail, almost imperceptible. I was in their kitchen, preparing lunch. They had just moved into the house whose down payment I had helped pay with my savings. I had brought a glass container with a pot roast I made that morning. It was my mother's recipe, and I always made it when I wanted the meal to be special and taste like home. I put the pot roast on the table, set the plates, and called both of them to eat. Vanessa came down the stairs, looked at the table, and wrinkled her nose with evident distaste. "Martha, you didn't need to. That heavy gravy makes a mess on the table, and the smell lingers in the whole house. We like lighter things here." She said this smiling, like someone handing you a destructive criticism wrapped in fine gift paper. Michael let out a quick, almost silent chuckle, just to go along with her expression and not upset her. I stopped, serving spoon in hand. I didn't say anything. I just took the container off the table and put it back in my bag. She didn't even realize that I did it slowly so as not to show what I felt in that instant. In that moment, a strange coldness rose in my chest. I knew that type of venomous subtlety very well. It wasn't about the pot roast, it was about the place I occupied there. It was about not making me feel welcome, about always being a little too much for their refined taste. But I thought, it's just the adjustment period. She's nervous about the new house. I won't take it to heart. And I went on with lunch normally, even though I noticed their conversation flowed without really including my opinions. After that, other small, similar situations followed. Once, she commented that my clothes had too many loud prints. Another time, she insinuated that I didn't need to visit the couple so early because they had their own routine. And Michael, without perceiving the gravity of it, always agreed too quickly. I avoided thinking badly of her. I avoided creating problems or conflicts. I avoided believing that there was something bigger and darker there. You always try to convince yourself that it's just an impression, that everything will pass. But inside me, a small door began to close slowly. However, I didn't have the courage to touch that door yet. I kept helping, of course. I cleaned what needed cleaning. I cooked for them. I stayed to watch the kids when they were born. They were a lot of work, but they were the love of my life, my grandkids. I did the impossible so that this home would remain united. Because after everything I had sacrificed, I just wanted to see my son doing well and stable. Except the beginning of the changes was already there. Small, distant, disguised. And even without wanting to admit it, I already felt that something was out of place, like a puzzle piece that doesn't fit. The coexistence seemed normal on the outside, but on the inside, I already felt the deep cracks. Vanessa had a way of speaking that was never direct, but always made it clear that I was extra. In the beginning, they were small observations, easy to ignore. But over time, these small splinters became routine, as if every day she tested a new limit. And Michael, without realizing it, followed the same tone. The first evident humiliation happened on a Saturday morning. I was going to their house to help with the kids because Michael had a commitment and Vanessa was going to get a manicure. When I arrived, she was in the kitchen, sorting through some things. I put down my purse and went to wash my hands. The bottle where I kept my medicine, simple blood pressure pills, was no longer in the usual drawer. "Oh, Martha, I put your things in the back utility room," she said, without looking up from her phone. The kitchen was getting too cluttered, and honestly, having medicine bottles lying around gives off a somewhat disorganized vibe. The way she said it wasn't about space. It was about my place in that house. I looked at Michael, who was sitting on the sofa tying his shoelaces. He didn't lift his head, just said, "Yeah, Mom, it's better that way." I stood frozen for a second, breathing deeply to keep from crying. Then, I walked to the back utility room. The bottle was thrown on top of an old box. I didn't say anything. I just took it and put it in my purse. In that moment, I felt something tighten inside me, as if I were shrinking a little more. But I went on with the day, playing with my grandkids, as if nothing had happened. The second humiliation came a few months later. It was my oldest grandson's birthday. I spent the entire morning baking a homemade cake, as I did every year. It was the recipe he liked best. I arrived at Michael's house, put the cake on the table, and started cutting the candles. Vanessa arrived from outside, arms loaded with shopping bags. She looked at the table, frowned with disgust, and blurted out, "Oh, Martha, I already asked you not to bring this kind of thing. Here, we really watch their diet. Sugar, white flour. That hurts them, you know. You're good in the kitchen, but let's keep it to only what I buy." She said this with a smile, as if she were educating me or teaching me something I was ignorant about. But I saw my grandson's look. He remained torn between looking at me with sadness and looking at his mother with fear. And that hurt more than her words. "Never mind, Vanessa. It's just for today," I said quietly. She set the bags on the table with enough force to make the candles roll across the surface. "Today, tomorrow, later. You always bring something different. I need you to respect the rules of my house." I felt my face burn. Michael walked into the living room at that moment and asked what was happening. Vanessa answered quickly, getting ahead of it. "Nothing, honey. Your mother brought another cake full of sugar. I already spoke to her." And he replied, without thinking twice, "Mom, pay attention to that, please. We have a way of raising the boys." It was the first time I felt a real distance from my own son. Not because of the cake, but because of the way he spoke. Automatic, mechanical, as if repeating Vanessa's lines was part of his daily routine. The third humiliation was the worst of that phase. I was in the living room with the boys, helping them with their homework. They were focused, and I loved those moments of connection. Suddenly, I heard the master bedroom door slam shut. Vanessa came out, speaking loudly, almost shouting, "Michael, I'm done! Your mother is taking up the entire space of the house. I can't take it anymore. I want my privacy." The boys looked at me, scared. I closed the notebook slowly. Michael tried to calm her down. "Calm down, Vanessa. There's no need to talk like that." But she continued without lowering the volume. "I already told you. Every time she comes, she spends her time opening cupboards, leaving stuff around the house. I can't stand it anymore. I want my life. I didn't marry your mother." I remained seated in absolute silence, not knowing if I should get up or wait for the storm to pass. Michael came into the living room and said to me, lowering his eyes in shame, "Mom, maybe it's better if you come over less often." Just to avoid conflict. Those words were a deep cut, not because he asked me to come less often, but because he had already chosen a side, and it clearly wasn't mine. That day, when I returned home, I sat on the sofa and looked at my empty hands. It was as if I were aging faster there, amidst the small slights, the hidden words, the way Michael didn't perceive what was happening. It was that day that I did something I had never done before. I started documenting everything. I took a simple notebook, which I had bought to use as a planner, and I wrote down exactly what she said, how she said it, who was in the house, and the time. It wasn't revenge. It was defense. A natural instinct of someone who, for the first time, realizes they are being pushed into a corner. The notes became a habit. When she complained about the smell of my cooking in the kitchen, I wrote it down. When she moved my things without warning, I wrote it down. When she made subtle comments about me not keeping up with their pace, I wrote it down. When Michael used her same words to speak to me, I wrote that down too. Because little by little it became clear. It wasn't just a restriction. It wasn't just distance. It was a systematic process, an erasing, as if they were wiping my name from that house, one gesture at a time, day after day. I kept helping, of course. I kept taking care of my grandkids because they were guilty of none of this. But every time I walked through the door of that house, I felt that I was entering only as a stranger, an outsider, and that, for a mother, is a silent wound that bleeds from the inside. Except I didn't know, at that time, that this was only the beginning. Vanessa hadn't yet shown how far she was capable of going, and Michael hadn't yet understood how far he had already drifted from me. But I was starting to see clearly, and for the first time in my life, I was preparing myself, even without knowing it, to protect myself from my own son. The blow didn't start with a direct question. It started with small comments that, at the time, seemed just like couples' conversation. A hint here, another there. Vanessa complaining about the old car. Michael commenting that work was too demanding. Her saying that the life they wanted needed a financial push. Him repeating that we deserve more. I listened to everything, like someone who shouldn't be there, but who was always called to watch the kids while they handled important things. Until, on a Wednesday afternoon, the real request arrived. I was at their house, folding the kids' laundry, when I heard Michael call me from the living room. When I appeared, they were sitting together on the sofa. Vanessa with that expression too polished to be casual. Michael with his leg bouncing, as he always did when he was nervous. "Mom, we wanted to talk to you," he said. I already knew. A mother knows. The breathing changes, the atmosphere changes, even the sound of the refrigerator seems different. Vanessa began to speak, as if she were the official spokesperson for the family. "Martha, Michael and I are going through an important moment. We found an opportunity that could change everything. Except we need some initial capital, and we didn't want to ask anyone from the outside." She smiled with that smile that was too polite, that never reached her eyes. "What opportunity?" I asked. She crossed her legs and adjusted her hair. "An investment, a project that could double the return in a few months. And since you've always helped us, we thought you could lend us a temporary amount, just while the paperwork gets approved." Michael didn't look me in the eye. That told me more than any word he could have spoken. "How much?" I asked. She said the number without hesitating. A high figure, too high to be resolved casually. I felt a knot in my stomach. Intuition screamed at me from the inside out. "It's a loan, Mom," Michael completed. "We'll pay you back as soon as the return comes in. It's a matter of 2 months. I took a deep breath. I remained silent for a few seconds. It wasn't the first time I had helped financially, but this request had a different scent. It came prepared, rehearsed, too sure of itself, and Vanessa spoke like someone who was already counting on a yes. "I need to think about it," I said. Vanessa tilted her head, keeping her smile. "Of course, Martha, but it's a unique chance for Michael to grow even more. And honestly, that money is better in the family's hands than sitting in a bank account." The use of the word family hurt. Not because she said it, but because of the way she said it, as if I were merely a utilitarian piece of this family. I went back home with a heavy head. I sat on the sofa, looked at my notebook, and stayed there, motionless. It wasn't just about the money. It was something deeper. It was about the intention behind the request. That night, I barely slept. You know when a thought comes back again and again, even if you try to push it away? It was that. My intuition told me it wasn't right, but my whole life I had helped. And every time Michael needed something, I had been available. How could I say no now? The next morning, before leaving my house, I did something I never thought I would do. I separated copies of all my receipts, balances, deeds, and documents that could prove the source of the amount I was about to hand over. I put everything in a thin, transparent folder. It wasn't mistrust. It was protection. Life taught me the hard way that blind trust and naivety don't walk together. I went back to their house. Vanessa was in the kitchen. Michael appeared shortly after. "I'm going to lend it to you," I said, "but I want everything in writing." The two exchanged glances. Vanessa flashed a smile that was too courteous. "Of course, Martha. No problem at all." Michael just nodded, letting out an evident sigh of relief. We signed a simple document. Nothing too elaborate. Just enough to record the formal commitment. I handed over the money. Vanessa held the envelope with too much naturalness, as if she were already used to handling that amount of money. And, that very day, my intuition was confirmed in the worst way. Hours later, while I was still at their house, Vanessa left to handle a quick thing. She came back driving a new car. It wasn't extravagant, but it was far from cheap. When she walked in with the keys jingling in her hand, she smiled like someone showing off a won trophy. "We thought it was better to get ahead of it, right, honey?" she said to Michael. In the end, the deal was too good. She said, "We thought," but her look said, "I decided." My heart sank in my chest. The return on investment, which was supposedly going to take 2 months, now seemed to evaporate into thin air. I didn't say anything. I just observed. Months passed, and not a trace of the money back. Every time I asked, Vanessa said the paperwork was delayed. When I spoke to Michael, he recited canned phrases, always short, always the same. Calm down, Mom. It's normal. You have to trust. It's a matter of time. The word trust began to weigh on me like a tombstone. It was then that one day I saw a high debit on their account while Vanessa was showing me something on her phone and turned the screen too fast. I realized there was no investment. It was spending. Spending after spending. A new life, as she said. The following month, when the loan deadline definitely expired, I went to talk to Michael. He was irritated, anxious. Vanessa stayed by his side, arms crossed, defensive. "You promised you would pay me back now," I said. Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Martha, you need to understand that things aren't that simple. We are reorganizing our life, and honestly, talking about this money every second doesn't help anything." Michael completed, raising his tone. "Mom, stop. You always do this. You always turn everything into a drama." Drama. The word fell like a heavy stone. "I just want what we agreed on," I replied firmly. Michael raised his voice. "Do you think I don't know what I'm doing? Do you think I'm irresponsible? Is that what you think of me?" I didn't think that. But in that moment, I realized that he thought I thought it. And in a way, that explained everything. He needed to feel big and important. And I, even without meaning to, reminded him of all the times he wasn't. Vanessa held his arm and spoke to him in a low voice. "Let's go, honey. Let her wait." And they walked out, leaving me standing there, with the feeling that something had broken forever between us. But I didn't know at that time that the worst was still to come, and that the public humiliation awaiting me would transform all those small pains into a deep, irreversible cut. The definitive humiliation didn't happen inside their house, nor in a private conversation. It happened where everyone could see, where no one could pretend they hadn't heard, where even those who didn't know me felt secondhand embarrassment for me. It was a Saturday morning. My grandkids' school was organizing a cultural fair, and every family had a booth with food and crafts. I had spent the entire night baking homemade chocolate chip cookies and some simple brownies because I knew the kids loved them. I brought everything in 2 large bags and went early to help. When I arrived, Vanessa was arranging the family table with imported packaging, expensive catered salads, and things I couldn't even pronounce. Michael was setting up a banner with the boys' names. I approached slowly, not wanting to disturb. "Good morning," I said, trying to sound light. Vanessa didn't even lift her head. Michael replied with a small gesture, quick, like someone barely acknowledging an annoying presence, not like someone happy to see his mother. "I brought some cookies to put on the table," I said, showing the bag with pride. Vanessa lifted her face slowly, with that air of critical evaluation I already knew well. "Are those homemade?" she asked with disdain. "Yes, I baked them last night." She sighed deeply, like someone receiving terrible news. "Martha, we agreed to maintain a certain standard here. These simple cookies end up cheapening the presentation of the table. It doesn't match the school's proposal." I felt my face burn with shame. "But it's just to put them in the corner. The kids like them," I replied, trying to defend my effort. She smiled, that smile that wounds more than any scream. "No, Martha, we are not putting any of that here. I already told you, you exaggerate. We are trying to show something more professional." I stood paralyzed. The noise of other families chatting seemed to get louder around me. Several people at the fair started looking at us. I tried to swallow any response I had in my throat. It was then that Michael did what I will never forget. He took the bag from my hand, put it on the floor, next to the table, and said loudly, loud enough for the parents at the next table to look, "Mom, please. You always show up with these things nobody asked for. We don't need this. Go get some rest. You are in the way." The phrase, "you are in the way," came out dry, hard, sharp as a razor. I felt the air leave my body all at once. It wasn't just what he said. It was the way. It was the body posture. It was the rush to get rid of me. It was the look of pity from the people around. Mrs. Johnson, the mother of one of the classmates, stopped what she was doing. Another girl's father furrowed his brow, and a teacher passing slowly lowered her head like someone witnessing something that shouldn't happen there. I lowered my eyes to the bag on the floor. One of the cookies had slid out through an opening in the wrapper. I bent down slowly to pick it up, And it was at that moment I heard Vanessa say, almost laughing, "See? Look at that. She doesn't even know how to present things right. Then she complains that things don't work out in her life." Michael didn't say anything, but it wasn't necessary. His silence hit me harder than any word. I stood up slowly, holding the bag as if it weighed tons. I felt my entire body trembling. It wasn't anger. It was shame. Of those shames that burn from the inside and leave your throat dry. "I'm leaving," I managed to say with a thread of a voice. No one tried to stop me. No one said, "Stay, Mom." No one reached out a hand. I walked through the fair in absolute silence. Halfway there, I felt my legs give way. I sat on a bench near the school entrance. The fair went on, full of laughter and happy music. And there I was, clutching a bag of cookies as if it were the last piece of my dignity left. I spent 2 days unable to get out of bed. My body felt like lead. My chest physically hurt. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Michael's face. Hard, distant, so different from the boy I had raised with so much love. But on the 3rd day, when the sun came through the window, I got up, because the pain didn't disappear. It only changed form. And when I sat at the kitchen table, I saw my notebook. It had been there since the first day I felt something was wrong. I opened it, picked up a pen, took a deep breath, and did what I had to do. It was time to organize the proofs. The days following the fair were empty. I woke up, but I had no will to get out of bed. The silence of my house seemed bigger than before, as if every corner repeated the phrase Michael had said in front of everyone. "You are in the way." Those words echoed as if they were spoken again every time I breathed. The first day, I just stayed lying down. I stared at the ceiling, trying to understand at what precise moment I had lost my son. The second day, I tried to tidy the house, but my body didn't respond. It seemed that even the simplest movements, like opening the refrigerator, demanded a strength I no longer had. The third day, I cried. It wasn't tears of rebellion. It was dry, tired weeping, of someone who finally understands that it's no use insisting where there is no longer space for you. And it was in the midst of that crying that I realized one thing. No one was coming to defend me. Not Michael, not Vanessa, not anyone. I was completely alone. For the first time in my life, I felt that with brutal clarity. And at the same time, I realized something else. If I did nothing, they were going to keep hurting me. They were going to keep using my effort as a tool to belittle me. They were going to keep destroying me until the day there was nothing left of me. So, on the 4th day, I got up early. I washed my face. I made myself a strong coffee. I sat at the kitchen table and pulled my old notebook toward me. I ran my hand over the cover like someone finding an old, faithful ally. It was only paper, but it contained everything I had lived and suffered in the last few months. I took a deep breath and began. I took a large box I had in the cupboard, one of those that come with dinner sets. I spread everything on the table: old bills, receipts, vouchers, copies of the loan, photos of the new car Vanessa bought the same day she received my money, screenshots of messages where Michael promised to pay back in 2 months. I opened folder by folder. I separated everything by date. I was becoming, right there, the investigator of my own life. Every paper had an associated memory. Every receipt carried a pain. Every note in my hand was a desperate attempt to survive what was happening. I gathered the loan documents, the simple contract with both signatures, the proof of the bank transfer of the amount. The notes I had taken the exact day I handed over the envelope. Then I took the messages sent by Michael, those where he said it was a bit unstable, that the investment was almost returning, that, "Don't worry, Mom." Everything printed, saved, protected. I made another pile with the proofs of the lifestyle they began to flaunt right after receiving the money. Receipts from exclusive boutiques that Vanessa showed with pride on her social media. Screenshots of the limousine that picked her up that afternoon she chased me out of her house. It wasn't envy. It was never envy. It was the clear and irrefutable proof that they had used my money to finance a lifestyle they could never sustain alone. The third pile was the most painful of all. The humiliations, the rejected cake, the medicine thrown in the utility room, the comments about me not being up to their standard, the public scene at the school fair. Everything described in my notebook with enough detail to show it wasn't an exaggeration. It wasn't an invention. It wasn't drama. It was a calculated process, a pattern, a clear intention. The fourth pile was small but vital. My own rights, my life savings, my retirement documents, the sale of my mother's house, the list of sacrifices I had made so that Michael could have the life he always had. Not to throw it in his face, that I would never do, but to remind myself that I wasn't asking for anything other than justice, nothing other than basic respect. When I finished organizing everything, I realized I was breathing more steadily. It wasn't just pain anymore, it was direction. I had, for the first time, a clear path. I closed the box slowly. I wrote on it, with a blue marker, proofs. I stayed a few minutes looking at that word. It wasn't revenge, it was protection. It was the way I found not to allow them to rewrite the story to their convenience. In the late afternoon, I sat on the sofa with the box on my lap. Its weight was the weight of my entire life, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like crying. I felt determination, the same determination I had when I became a widow, the same I had when I sold my mother's house, the same I had when I raised my son all alone against the world. And that determination led me to make another decision. The next morning, before sunrise, I went to the office of a lawyer a neighbor had recommended. A serious, polite man who listened to everything without interrupting me once. When I opened the box of proofs on his desk, he couldn't hide his surprise. "Ms. Martha," he said, running his hand over the documents, "you have a complete and solid case here." I didn't answer. I just nodded slowly. He continued, looking me in the eye. "If you want to move forward, I will help you. But I need to know one thing. Are you prepared to face your own son?" I looked at him with a tranquility I didn't even know I possessed. "I am not facing my son," I replied. "I am facing what was done to me." He closed the folder decisively. "Then let's begin." And so, without screams, without an audience, without drama, the definitive turning point of my life began. I walked out of the lawyer's office with the feeling that, for the first time in months, someone had listened to me for real. Not as a mother, not as the old lady who bothers everyone, but as a woman who had been the victim of an injustice and needed someone to see that. His name was Mr. Thompson, a simple man, soft-spoken, with a steady gaze and in no rush. He didn't seem impressed by ostentation, nor was he intimidated by people who spoke too loudly. He was the type of person who observes meticulously before acting. The next day, he called me early. "Miss Martha, I managed to free up a slot this afternoon. Can you come in? I want to review everything calmly." I brought the whole box again. This time, I sat across from him with less insecurity. The quiet way he leafed through the papers gave me a strange sense of safety. He didn't seem to doubt anything I said. He didn't seem to think it was an exaggeration. He didn't seem to look for legal loopholes to justify Michael's or Vanessa's behavior. He simply analyzed every sheet as if he were assembling a complex puzzle. "Let's take it step by step," he said, separating the documents into ordered groups. First, the loan. He took the simple contract we had signed and put it next to the transfer receipts. "Here you have a formal document signed by both. It doesn't matter the informality of the format. It is valid. The law recognizes it. And they didn't meet the deadline. This already constitutes default." I nodded, keeping my hands clasped in my lap. "Now," he continued, pulling out the screenshots of the texts, "the justifications they gave are important. They show bad faith. They show a change in behavior. They show total disregard." Then he separated receipts, printouts from social media, and even photos I had taken without intention. Images Vanessa posted flaunting new purchases, sudden trips, rental cars, expensive restaurants, things that had never been part of their life before the loan. "This demonstrates a misappropriation of funds," he said seriously. "They said it was an investment, but used it for personal benefit. That weighs very heavily." I remained silent. Not because I doubted, but because it was still strange to hear someone confirm out loud what I had felt in solitude for so long. "Now let's go to the emotional part," he said, opening my notebook. "This here might seem simple, but it has invaluable worth. It shows a pattern of behavior. It shows emotional abuse. It shows systematic humiliation. I took a deep breath when he read some fragments in a low voice. The medicine bottle moved, the cake removed from the table, the comment at the party, the scene at the school fair. He closed the notebook gently. Repeated, progressive humiliation. This dismantles any narrative that you are making things up. Then, he did something I didn't expect. He took a blank sheet, put it in the center of the desk, and started writing a number, then another, and another. We are going to calculate the full debt, not just the amount you lent. This here includes legal interest, late fees, emotional distress, and misappropriation of purpose. I watched, stunned, while he noted the values with mathematical precision. Mr. Thompson, is all this possible? I asked, feeling unsure. He looked at me in a firm and reassuring way. It is possible because it is fair. I stayed quiet. The word fair wasn't common in my life's vocabulary. I knew how to survive, help, give, resolve. But justice? That was something rare for me. After finishing the calculations, he breathed deeply. Ms. Martha, before any lawsuit, I propose a meeting. Something formal, with all parties present. You, your son, your daughter-in-law. I will be there. We are going to present everything. All the proofs, all the documents. Give them the opportunity to resolve this without going to court. My heart tightened when he said, your son. I still didn't know how to look Michael in the eye without remembering the day of the fair. And if they refuse? I asked with fear. Ah, he replied calmly. Then we proceed with the full lawsuit. Recovery of money, inflation adjustment, emotional damages, everything that is yours by right. But don't worry about that now. The first step is the meeting. I lowered my eyes to my hands. Mr. Thompson, I'm afraid he will treat me badly again. He crossed his hands on the desk. In that meeting, no one will treat you badly. I will be by your side. And most importantly, you are the one who will lead the situation. The story is yours. The voice is yours. The decision is yours. Those words went through me in a different way. I spent my whole life being the voice for others. For my son, for my husband, for the houses where I worked serving. Now, someone was telling me I would have my own voice. Just for me. And that shook something inside me. I went back home that day with a head full of thoughts, but a much lighter chest. I opened the box again on the table and reviewed every document as if I were preparing for a final exam. It wasn't revenge. It was survival. It was a rescue of myself. In the following days, Mr. Thompson contacted Michael and Vanessa. They tried to avoid the meeting at all costs. Michael said it wasn't necessary. Vanessa said she was too busy. But the lawyer was unwavering. It is mandatory, he told them. And the sooner it's done, the better for everyone involved. The date was set for the following week. The night before, I barely slept. It wasn't fear of the legal process. It was fear of looking at Michael and not finding even a shadow of the boy I had raised. But something inside me said it was necessary. That pain only ends when we face what insists on coming back. I spent the morning rehearsing what I was going to say. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to argue. I just wanted to be clear, true, real. In the afternoon, I dressed calmly. Simple clothes, clean, formal. I tied back my hair. I put my notebook in my purse. I took the box of proofs. I breathed deeply, and I went. Mr. Thompson was waiting for me at the office door. When he saw me, he smiled slightly. Ready? I didn't answer with words. I just nodded. He opened the door to the room. Michael and Vanessa were already in there. Vanessa with arms crossed, an expression of total impatience. Michael, checking his phone, without the courage to lift his head. I walked in. I placed the box on the table firmly. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt that I wasn't the defenseless person in this story. The room remained in absolute silence. The confrontation would start right there. In the week of the meeting, something changed inside me. It wasn't sudden courage. It wasn't novel-like strength. It was a strange calm, almost silent, as if my body had finally understood that running away was no longer possible. I woke up earlier each day, tidied the house slowly, drank my coffee looking out the window, and let the pain settle in the right place. not to control me, but to remind me why I was doing all of this. The first day, I reviewed the entire box. I took out the proofs, laid them on the table, and organized the order in which I would present each one. The loan contract first, then the transfer receipt. Next, the screenshots of the conversations, then the receipts that contradicted everything Vanessa said, and finally, the photos of the lifestyle that began the very month the money left my account. The second day, I reread my notebook, line by line, word for word, not to fill myself with rage, but so I wouldn't forget anything when the moment came. I didn't want to exaggerate. I didn't want to invent. I wanted to say exactly what happened, with the clarity I had always lacked when I stayed silent to avoid conflict. The third day, I mentally organized what I was going to say. Short sentences, direct, no beating around the bush. You asked me for it. I lent it to you. You promised. You broke your word. And this has consequences. I spoke in a low voice, alone, around the house. It wasn't a rehearsal of a speech. It was creating order. A way to align my own thinking, because I knew Vanessa would try to destabilize me. It had always been like that. She spoke fast, changed the subject, turned my words against me. Except this time, it wouldn't be the same. I had proofs, and more importantly, I had myself standing tall. The fourth day, I went to buy a new blouse. Nothing flashy, just something simple, sober, no prints. I wanted to look put together, but I didn't want to look like another person. I wanted that. When Michael lifted his eyes, he saw the mother who raised him, not the fragile version he had gotten used to treating like a burden. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. Not out of fear of the lawsuit, not out of fear of losing the money, but because I knew that there, in that room, I was going to have to look at Michael and understand once and for all who he had become. And that was the part that hurt the most. I got up before sunrise. I made coffee. I took a long shower. I tied back my hair. I put on a light perfume. Then I put on the new blouse, the most formal pants I had, and comfortable shoes. I didn't want to appear fragile, nor aggressive. I wanted to appear whole, even if inside I was trembling. I picked up the box of proofs. It felt heavier than the last time. Maybe it was just an impression, or maybe it was the weight of the final decision. I put it inside a sturdy bag, the kind I kept for important things. Before leaving, I stopped at the living room door and breathed deeply. The house was silent, the kind of silence that arrives when something is about to change forever. The way to the office seemed longer than it really was. The bus swayed, and I held the box with both hands as if it were an extension of my body. I looked out the window and thought about the boy Michael had once been, about the son who promised he would take care of me when I got old, about the teenager who cried inconsolably when he lost his father and clung to me as if I were the only solid ground he had. And now I was the obstacle. I knew reliving this was going to hurt deeply, but I also knew it was no longer possible to ignore it. When I arrived, Mr. Thompson was at the door. He greeted me with a firm handshake, and that brought me back to the present. "Breathe, Ms. Martha. Today you are not alone." I nodded. He opened the door for me. Before entering the room, I heard their voices. Vanessa's voice was always heard first, fast, dry, impatient. Michael's came after, lower, more uncertain, as if he were trying to convince himself he was in the right place. Mr. Thompson turned to me. "Remember, you're driving this. I only intervene when necessary." I nodded affirmatively, clutching the bag tightly. He opened the door to the conference room. Vanessa was sitting at the head of the table, arms crossed, expression of total boredom. Michael was looking at his phone, just like the last time. When they saw me, both fell silent. I walked in slowly, placed the box on the table, and pulled out the chair. No one said anything for a few interminable seconds. And it was there, in that dense silence, that the most important confrontation of my entire life began. The silence in that room seemed to have physical weight. Vanessa tapped the tip of her fingernail against the table, impatient. Michael kept his phone in his hand, but he could no longer pretend to be focused on it. Mr. Thompson closed the door gently, walked to his seat, and sat with absolute calm, like someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. I placed the box of proofs right in the center of the table. No one spoke a word. The entire room seemed to await my first intervention. "Thank you for coming," I said, with my voice firmer than I imagined it would come out. Vanessa let out a short, sarcastic laugh. "We came because we were forced to, right? But let's get to the point, Martha. What exactly do you want? Money? Explanations? Drama?" Michael didn't look at her. He barely sighed, running his hand over his forehead wearily. Mr. Thompson leaned forward. "I ask for respect in the conduct of this meeting, Mrs. Vanessa. Ms. Martha will speak first." I took a deep breath and opened the box. I took out the first envelope. "Let's start with the loan." I put the simple contract on the table, sliding it until it was in front of them. Michael recognized his own signature instantly. His face changed slightly. "You asked me for this amount," I continued. "You said it was temporary. 2 months, Michael. 2 months." Vanessa crossed her arms arrogantly. "Martha, for the love of God, you know business is business. Not everything goes as planned." I took the transfer receipt and put it next to it. "Here is the date the money left my account. Now look at this other document." I took out a printout of a post from Vanessa herself on her social media. The photo of a new car with an animated caption, "New life, new achievements." "This car was bought the very same day," I completed. Michael looked quickly at Vanessa, disconcerted. She lifted her chin defiantly. "So what? It's not a crime to buy what I want." "Not with the money you promised to pay me back," I replied. Mr. Thompson then pulled the documents toward him. "Misappropriation of funds, Mrs. Vanessa. When someone solicits a loan under the pretense of an investment and uses it for personal benefit, that characterizes bad faith." She rolled her eyes. "What drama, my God," I continued. I took out the screenshots of the conversations and lined them up on the table. "Here you promised me to return it within the agreed time frame. Here you said the money was already coming back. Here you asked for calm. Here you asked for more time." Michael ran his hand over his face. "Mom, I thought it was going to work out. But you didn't take care of anything," I replied. "And when I asked, you said I was creating drama." He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. "Now let's go to another part," said Mr. Thompson in a firm tone. "Ms. Martha is not here just for the money. There are records of emotional humiliation, abusive behavior, and public ridicule." Vanessa laughed. "Oh, please, seriously? All this for some cookies and a little cake?" She has always been too sensitive. I leaned forward, staring her straight in the eye. "It wasn't one time. It wasn't about the food. It was about respect." I took my notebook. I opened it to the page of the cultural fair. "Date such and such, time such and such. In front of dozens of people, you called me a burden. Michael said I was in the way. You threw my food on the floor." Michael's face turned red with shame. "Mom, I didn't speak that way." I turned the page. "Michael, you said, 'Go get some rest. You are in the way.' I wrote it down. I remember it. Everyone heard." He squinted, like someone trying to block a painful memory. Vanessa got ahead of it. "Martha, you exaggerate. You always exaggerate. You spend your time noting everything down like you're the perfect victim. We just tried to put some order in the house." "Order?" I repeated. "Or estrangement?" Silence was the answer. I took out the photo of the medicine bottle she had put in the utility room. "Is this order too? Throwing my things in the junk room? I didn't complain. I never complained." Vanessa huffed. "And you should have complained then. I'm not a mind reader." "Complain?" I repeated, feeling something firm growing inside me. Every time I tried to speak, you turned to Michael and told him I was being dramatic, that I wanted attention, that I wasn't up to your standard. Everyone remained silent for a few tense seconds. Mr. Thompson then picked up a pen. "Let's make one thing clear. There is a robust set of proofs here. The loan was not repaid. There was bad faith. There was public humiliation. There are emotional damages. If we go to court, the couple will hardly escape a conviction." Vanessa straightened her posture, looking worried for the first time. "What are you insinuating?" "I'm not insinuating. I'm explaining," he replied. "If there is a lawsuit, you and Mr. Michael will have to pay the full debt, with interest, fines, and compensation for moral damages. And all of this will remain on your record, including the public humiliation before witnesses." Michael looked at me, finally facing me. "Mom, Did it have to come to this? I clasped my hands in my lap to control the trembling. It had to, because you never listened to me before. He lowered his eyes. I was wrong, he said, almost in a whisper. I let things slip away from me. I should have treated you better. I don't know at what moment everything went out of control. Vanessa turned quickly to him. You're not going to accept this, are you? You're not going to submit to this emotional blackmail. I slapped the palm of my hand against the table. Not hard, but firmly. This isn't blackmail. It's a consequence. She opened her mouth to retort, but Mr. Thompson raised his hand. Let's get to the final point. He placed a document on the table. I propose an agreement. You repay the full amount lent, plus legal interest, in installments if necessary. If you want to avoid a lawsuit for moral damages, include an additional compensatory amount. Vanessa almost jumped out of her chair. What absurdity! You think I'm going to pay for this woman to persecute me? I didn't do anything. You did, I replied, and you know it. She looked at me with pure hate. I never liked you. I tried, I replied. But you never allowed it. Michael finally put his phone on the table. His eyes were misty. I accept the agreement. Vanessa turned to him, shocked. What? I accept, he repeated. I owe this to my mother. I lost control, Vanessa. I let you boss everything around. I let you speak for me. And look where we ended up. She remained silent, defeated. Michael turned to me. Mom, forgive me. I breathed deeply. I didn't make a speech. I didn't dramatize. I only replied, I hope you truly understand. Mr. Thompson prepared the draft of the agreement right there. Vanessa signed with force, almost tearing the paper with the pen. Michael signed in silence, his hand trembling. I signed at the end. When I finished writing my name, I closed the pen slowly and said the phrase that closed the entire cycle. Now, I can finally leave. I stood up. I took my notebook. I took my box. I walked out of the room feeling that, for the first time in a long time, my body was light. Not because I won, but because I no longer carried their weight. I walked through the door, and for the first time, the future didn't seem like a frightening place. After the agreement, life didn't go back to normal. It took a completely new direction. A silent, firm direction, which didn't come from screams or exaggerated victories, but from small decisions that were finally mine. The signed document brought consequences for all of us, not as punishment, but as the natural adjustment of what was pending. The first consequence came 2 days later. Michael called me. His voice sounded low, different. It wasn't the sure tone he used to use when he repeated Vanessa's words. It was a simple tone of someone who didn't know where to start. Mom, I wanted to thank you for yesterday, for the way you spoke, for the calm. I listened, but I didn't answer immediately. I waited for him to continue. And I wanted to apologize for real. I was wrong with you. I let Vanessa drive everything. I let my life become something else. I stopped being your son. I breathed deeply, not to cry, but so as not to say something in the heat of emotion. Because the truth is, I was too hurt to accept an apology as if it solved everything magically. Michael, I heard your apology, but I need time. A lot of time. And you need it too. He remained silent. Then he replied, I'm going to pay you on time, Mom. Every month. I won't miss it. I know, I replied. Now it's your responsibility. Just fulfill it. He sighed. When you want, we can talk in person. One day, I told him, but not now. It was the first time in years that I set a clear boundary, and he accepted it. He didn't argue. He didn't try to turn the conversation around. He just said, okay, Mom, and hung up. Days later, Vanessa sent me a very short message. Signed. Just that. No apology, no explanation, no kindness. It was the most she could give, and I no longer expected anything coming from her. I learned from close people that she lost a lot of the perfect image she had built with such care. At school, other mothers commented on what they had seen. In the new gated community, people asked about the lawsuit. She didn't handle exposure well when it wasn't to show off luxury, and that, in itself, already had enough impact to make her rethink her steps. As for Michael, I learned that people in his family started demanding some backbone from him, not with aggressive complaints, but with simple questions. Why did you do that to your mother? How did you let it get to that point? What kind of life do you want to build? Nothing hurts more than the moral mirror others place in front of us when we make mistakes. And he had to look into that mirror every day. The debt started to be paid. Small installments, but constant. The agreement included additional values for the damages I suffered. It wasn't a fortune. It wasn't a lottery prize. It wasn't revenge. It was reparation. And reparation isn't about money. It's about respect. But the true consequence didn't happen with them. It happened with me. For many years, my life revolved around serving, helping, yielding, avoiding conflicts at all costs. I was a mother before being a woman, before being a person, before being myself. After the hearing, when I arrived home and closed the door, I realized I didn't know who I was without carrying the weight of others. The first day, the silence felt strange. The second, the freedom felt strange. The third, I felt that my house was finally mine. And that brought me a sensation of relief I didn't remember feeling since I was young. I started little by little. First, I tidied the house without rushing. Then, I went to the market and bought things I liked, not the things I used to buy thinking of the grandkids or Michael. My things. Simple, but mine. I chose a bread that wasn't on sale. I chose a coffee with a better aroma. I chose flowers to put on the kitchen table. Not because someone was coming to visit, but because I deserved to see beauty in my own home. Sometime later, I visited another town. Small, quiet, near a square with ancient trees. I walked slowly through the streets, and I felt something inside me open space for a new beginning. I saw simple houses for rent, large windows, shady yards, people sitting on the porch chatting as if time walked slowly there. I felt peace, a peace I hadn't felt for a very long time. The following month, I made my decision. I packed my bags. I selected only what really mattered: my notebook, some photos, simple clothes, and my sewing box, the same one my mother used. I rented a small house in the town I had visited. It wasn't luxurious, it wasn't modern, but it was bright. And when I opened the door for the first time, I felt as if I were entering the beginning of my life, not the end. I started a new routine. I woke up early, drank my coffee on the front porch, greeted the neighbors passing by with their dogs. I walked slowly through the square, sat on a bench, and watched people pass. In the afternoon, I started doing small sewing jobs for some neighbors on the street. I hemmed pants, replaced zippers, adjusted dresses. They always said, "You have very good hands, Martha. It's hard to find someone like that these days." And I smiled, a smile that came easily, without weight. I made new friendships. Mrs. Robinson, from the yellow house. Mr. Peterson, who sold vegetables on the corner. Betty, who watched the neighborhood grandkids. Simple, kind people without hidden agendas. People who called me by my name without adding labels. And it was on a quiet afternoon that I received the first video call from Michael. I hesitated before answering, but I answered. He was thinner, with deep circles under his eyes. He didn't look like a defeated man. He looked like a man waking up after years of sleeping. "Mom, is that your new house?" "Yes. It's pretty," he said. "There's light. It looks peaceful." I smiled slightly. "Yes, it is. It's doing me good." He breathed deeply. "I wanted to come visit you one day, whenever you want." "One day," I replied. "But for now, stay focused on what you need to fix in your life." He agreed. And this time, he didn't insist. I continued living, continuing to take care of myself, continuing to discover a version of me I had never known. A woman who doesn't beg for space, who doesn't implore for attention, who doesn't cancel herself to fit into anyone's life. Today, I see everything with a clarity I lacked before. Respect isn't something you ask for. It's something you live. Love isn't humiliation disguised as care. Family isn't an imposition. It's a bond. And the bond only exists where there is reciprocity. I didn't need to destroy anyone to recover my dignity. I only needed to set boundaries. I only needed to show the truth. I only needed to remind myself that I exist. And that is what I want to leave as a final message. You are not a burden. You are not in the way. You are not the leftovers of anyone's life. You are your own life. and starting over has no age limit. It never did. If this story touched you in some way, comment here which city you are speaking from. And stay with me for the next videos that are going to appear there on the screen. Someone might need to hear this today.